Welcome back to my views and news. Some news stories for you. First one is about a message from Getachew Reda, Tigray presidential spokesperson, who spoke today after a gap of a few days. He talked about Eritrean military's presence in Tigray. He quoted an article by Financial Times. What did he say? Secondly, Tigray, a court in Tigray has released some journalists who were arrested around 8 months ago. And thirdly, we have a new story for you from Somalia, where Hassan Sheikh is trying to find a solution to ongoing political conflict in the southwest state of the country, where a reconciliation, a conference is underway. Hassan Sheikh is there too. Firstly, viewers, Getachew Reda today, just a few minutes ago, responded to an article published by the Financial Times. The writer of the article quotes Olusegun Obasanjo, that according to Olusegun Obasanjo, around 600,000 people died in Ethiopian conflict. And secondly, the writer claims, quoting Obasanjo, that Eritrean military is at the border, meaning thereby that it has withdrawn to its border. Getachew is disagreeing with this position of Olusegun Obasanjo or the Financial Times. He said that Eritrean military, Eritrean soldiers are digging in their heels big time, and African Union's monitoring and verification mechanism observers are nowhere near Eritrean forces. And he's asking Financial Times, maybe Obasanjo as well, that first of all, observers should be allowed to go to the places, to entire Tigray, and then see for themselves where Eritrean military is. So he is saying, Getachew, that Eritrean forces are consolidating their positions, beefing up their defensive and offensive positions in Tigray. He is disagreeing with Financial Times report. And that is what we have been reporting to, that Eritrean military did withdraw from major towns and cities of Tigray, but we cannot say that withdrawal has been completed. They are there in small numbers in the outskirts of main towns and cities. What are they waiting for? It's not clear. Are they waiting for complete disarmament of Tigray fighters, or they have other plans? Even a separate, we will try to analyze their intentions. Are there some unresolved issues between Ethiopian and Eritrean governments? Why aren't they withdrawing? Eritrean soldiers, Amhara forces too. Is the Ethiopian government on board? Several questions, but at least Getachew is confirming that Eritrean military is consolidating its presence in Tigray. No signs of complete withdrawal. People would say, Sajid, you just parrot what is being said by Getachew. Problem is that the other side keeps silent. I always report what Eritrean Information Minister says, what their government says, but if they are silent, how can we speak on their behalf? We are sharing you with Getachew's position, and that is what is being confirmed by other sources too, mostly humanitarian workers who say there are still present, military still present in Tigray. Secondly, viewers, the second news story is about some journalists who were arrested in Tigray around 8 months ago. 5 journalists working for Tigray TV were arrested. They were working in different positions, and some were working for years. And when interim government was put in place in Tigray by Ethiopian federal government in November 2020, after November 2020, after that, these journalists were assigned some tasks. Then in June 2021, Tigray forces retook Mekelle. Tigray TV came under their control. The journalists kept on performing their duties, but in May 2022, last year, the journalists were arrested. They were accused of collaborating with enemies and disseminating enemies' propaganda. The 5 journalists were Tishome Timaleo, firstly. Secondly, Messina Siyom, Heben Halefom, Heli Michael Gassase, and Daud Mkanan. And it took the police several months to frame charges against these journalists. So they remained in prison without charges for several weeks, which was again a violation of Ethiopian media law. And then a few weeks ago, one journalist was released. Heben Halefom was released. And then last week, 2 other journalists were released too. Tishome Timaleo and Messina Siyom were released too. It means that now 3 journalists have been released. 2 are still in prison. Who are they? Haile Michael Gassase and Daud Mkanan are still in prison. Though charges against 5 of them were similar charges. But a court in Mekelle has released 3 journalists and 2 are still in prison. No one is asking questions, especially in Tigray. Opposition parties should have raised this issue. Tigray Independence Party, Baidoa, Salsevujene. I did not hear any statement from these parties. If the journalists were collaborating with the federal government, with ENDF, with Eritrean military, there should have been evidence shared by regional government, by police. If there was no evidence, opposition parties should have condemned this move. I have not seen any condemnation so far. None of these 5 journalists has been convicted. It means there was no solid evidence against them. Let's hope that this action against journalists, which we see in Amhara region, in Oromia, is not repeated in Tigray. Lastly, Hassan Sheikh is on reconciliation mission. Somalia's president is in Baidoa, a southwest state where President Lafta Gareen's term has expired. Around a month ago, his presidential term expired. Parliament granted him extension. Opposition presidential candidates are rejecting his extension and they are protesting. We have seen armed confrontation between security forces and one opposition candidate in Baidoa. Now Hassan Sheikh is intervening. Hassan Sheikh is in Baidoa, main city of southwest state. Madube speaker is there, 2 tribal elders, politicians, key figures from the region and some from Mogadishu have arrived in Baidoa, where a conference is being held to find a solution to this political stalemate. We know that in 2022, Farmajo, former president of Somalia, tried to secure extension. Hassan Sheikh back then was opposition candidate. He rejected, other candidates as well rejected the extension. But we saw confrontation between opposition and government of Somalia. So there was fear of civil war in Mogadishu, but then Parliament withdrew from position of having granted extension to Farmajo. Election was held. Let's see what happens here. Uh, it's a good thing that these Somalia's politicians, they somehow resolve their issues. It seems sometimes that they're on the brink of a war, but then they just step back, they resolve their disputes. We have seen that several times in the last 2 to 3 years. But problem is that if such issues go on, obviously it means that politicians, government officials, they waste their time on the resolution of these issues. The issues should have been resolved. They shouldn't have reached a level where a president, speaker are intervening. That is why fight against the main threat, Al-Shabaab, is affected, because political elite keeps on fighting among themselves. Jubaland is also on extension. Jubaland's president, but Hassan Sheikh is not intervening there. And Lafta Green is seen as ally, a former president of Somalia. He's seen as Farmajo's ally, who was rival of Hassan Sheikh. So maybe Hassan Sheikh wants removal of Lafta Green as well through political means, not through military means. Thank you for watching.